and the way that the waves were crashing at the shore triggered triggered his realization that this is something I can use to describe the polypeptide chain. And how cool is that? Newton sitting, I don't know, it's probably apocryphal, but Newton sitting under the apple tree, apple falls on the floor, hits him on the head, whatever, and he's like, okay, gravity, I can use that to describe, right? There is a sense in which the essence of the work is drawn from existence. But the products themselves transcend the temporal, and this goes back to the idea of supertemporality, right? It transcends the temporal motivation for the product itself, right? Despite the fact that, for example, the polypeptide chain discovery, the idea of it, happened at a particular point in time in a particular geographic location, the product of that discovery is, we would argue, the description of the polypeptide chain, right? It transcends time. It took time to arrive at the discovery. This is clear now, right? It took time. It took many millennia to arrive at this one scientist who discovered it. But the discovery itself has always been there. It's the shedding to light of the discovery. It's the bringing to the fore the discovery that we commend the artist, right? So in not scientific terms, but in social terms, or social science terms, it would be the effort of myself and people like me who are bringing to a global audience repeatedly. It's important that we make educational opportunity really a human rights, because education is a human right. So educational opportunity has to be a human right. Right? You can't say that you have education as a human right, but you don't recognize that educational opportunity is a human right. And with the internet, it's the greatest means of exercising more opportunity, giving people. Now, people will choose to be educated or not. People will choose to watch videos like this and others or not. But the idea is, since education is a human right, educational opportunity has to be a human right. It has to be linked, right? That fact isn't something that myself and others have created out of thin air. It's a recognition of our social relationships, and what we do is we bring it, like the artist does, we bring the essence of that fact, of that reality, into fruition, right? So I want you to have a very clear understanding of sort of how this unfolds. All right, so second to last bullet point, and this is going to be a lot longer than I thought because we're still on page 1. Second to last bullet point on page 7, still section 1.4. The work then emerges through the artwork, right? The work emerges through the artwork, and we talked about that. The Greeks, I already read that. So the last bullet point then. He has a discussion, Heidegger has this amazing discussion of the construction of a temple, right? And I want to read a little bit when I get to B, but I want to tell you a little bit about the idea of the temple. You would imagine that an individual goes to a temple, and we're talking antiquity, so a temple erected to the gods, the god of Zeus, let's just say, right? So the individual goes to the temple, but the construction of the temple itself by builders of the temple, the construction of and this is very important, right? The construction of the temple itself attains meaning from the system of beliefs that legitimizes the temple itself. The artists, right, and this time the artists might be stonemasons, right? So the stonemason goes out there, the architect goes out there, and they construct this building. And the point is, what is the function of the building? Well, this is a religious building for religious devotees. The building itself, aesthetically, only has meaning in terms of its ability to facilitate devotion. Think about that. If we're talking about the construction of a temple, and the function of the temple is a place where devotees can be gathered, then there's only meaning in the building in terms as it facilitates devotion. Right? So that's very, very, very important. And I've talked previously about Zizek's discourse on City of Men, or I forget the name of the movie. City of Men, City of Children, something like that. So Zizek does a discourse which I think is wedded to, in a sense, though he might not have initially, constructed his argument to be wedded to Heideggerian aesthetic discourse. But the idea is a lot of the artwork that is produced within the context of social interpretation. And if you remove the artwork from its social interpretation, then you undermine the work itself, right? A temple can't be a temple without devotees, right? The temple is a temple because of devotees. Without devotees, it's just the building, right? That's very, very, very important. So here's a key point. This is A. The aesthetic view is the expression of the presence of being within the artwork, right? The aesthetic experience now, and this is a little bit deeper, right? The experience that an individual person has in relationship to the artwork is contingent, as Heidegger is saying, this is a paraphrase, of the presence of being in the work. There is a sense in which, when I look at Guernica, especially as a genocide scholar, I get it. Sort of disfigured bodies, huge mural, there's chaos everywhere. I wasn't at the event, but I get it. I see the image, and the image elicits in me an emotional experience. And what presents itself is one of angst, right? Or what presents itself is one of disgust, what have you. A better example might be, a more contemporary example might be one of my all-time, probably top 3, top 2 most favorite movies ever is Apocalypse Now, right? There is a sense in which, at the end, Brando says, which I think is just absolutely genius, he talks about the horror, right? The horror of the events that he's seen while he was at war, the carnage, the atrocities that he saw, but correspondingly in a very Nietzschean terms, because Nietzsche really collapses the polemics of everything, right? That's his whole point. That's the whole point of Nietzsche. I'm sort of screwing up my Nietzsche lecture series now by giving the final result right now, so sort of crassly. But Nietzsche collapses good and evil. He collapses right and wrong. He collapses the dualities. Not, I would say, into relativism, but it's for the purpose of collapse, right? He collapses those binary oppositions and those polemics. And the beauty of that scene, the horror, is a recognition that there was a certain beauty, there was a certain genius in the horror that he recognized, right? And it's that ultimate conflation of the duality of oppositions between horror and beauty, between hatred and love, between angst and peace, that a lot of people, unfortunately, just never, ever in their lifetime get to experience that feeling of the ultimate the ultimate oneness of it all, right? The conflation, or the collapse rather, of some into all, right? The conflation, collapse of opposition into oneness, right? And when you talk like this, I start to sound more like a philosopher, and I'm going to lose some of my viewers, I know, and I understand. But hopefully, if you're watching me, you're an artist yourself, and that vibe is a good vibe for you. It's a great vibe for me. So on page 7b now, last bit on page 7. So here's a direct quote from Heidegger. The temple, in its standing there, first gives to things their look. Let me just pause for a second. Right? It gives to things their look. I just got back from Oxford, and every single of the 38 colleges that define and create Oxford University, I was told by the tour guide, has its own cathedral, right? It has its own place of worship. And it's not mandatory that you go to worship, but we went to many, many of these cathedrals. And it's just amazingly beautiful. It really is what you think it is, right? It's very sort of audacious, massive, awe-inspiring stained glass structures. The organs are being played, bells are ringing, stained glass windows and wooden pews, and it has all of the trappings and regalia of what you think